Hello, everyone. My name is Amir Efrati. I am executive editor of a technology news publication called The Information. We do write about restaurant technology and delivery companies and so on, among many, many other things. And I'm very, very excited to be here because the topic of the economics and financials of food delivery is among the most hotly debated areas certainly that I've come across this year among our subscribers. And we've got a very good, pretty representative panel here of folks in this ecosystem. So it's very on point. And I think we're just going to go around and everyone's going to spend 30 seconds just introducing themselves and saying what they do and where they come from and where they're based currently. So we will start with Kelly from Boston. Go for it. Oh, your sound may be off. Oh, your sound is still off, I think. All right, we will go to Mark in the South Bay. Go for it, Mark.
Sure, yeah. My name is Mark Ferguson. I'm here in San Jose, California. I've been a DoorDasher and on a variety of platforms, sort of specializing in DoorDash for almost 5 years now. I have a regular career and a sort of a 9-to-5 job here in Silicon Valley. I need to make more money, and I don't have quite the same verve, to become a CEO of Full Kitchen or to become, VP of sales. So I decided to, begin dashing and starting right away. So since 2015, I've been paying very close attention on, what it's like to be a good dasher and various ways to, sort of maximize my time out there. And I started writing under the name Dash Bridges for Harry over at the Rideshare guy. And I'm looking at things from a dasher's point of view with also some corporate experience myself.
Okay. Kelly, I don't know if your audio situation's been fixed. Maybe tell us. No? You might want to sign out and sign back in again and see how it goes. Peter, what about you? Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be on this panel. My name is Peter. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Full Kitchen. Used to be at Google before that. And now we're pursuing our passion and trying to bring affordable and convenient food to the world.
Okay. Vignesh.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Vignesh Ganapathy. I go by Viggy. I head up government relations at Postmates, and I've been at the company for about 2.5 years now. Most of my background has been in creating wholesome communities through public policy. And of course, in the food delivery space, since we are touching aspects of our community ranging from our local brick and mortar retailers through individuals who are looking for ways to supplement their income, through people who may be homebound or taking care of loved ones that they, and so they're unable to access food and through the same means that others are able to do so. It means that, as we're looking at what it needs to be one that includes all of those different populations.
Okay. And Kelly, who will hopefully rejoin us, works for a very interesting company that helps restaurants to essentially maximize their real estate by learning how to make food for delivery only, and essentially working on very specific kind of food brands that these kitchens can actually make themselves and make the most of what they have. So that's actually a very interesting area and certainly very, very relevant today, still amid the COVID pandemic. So just to set up the conversation, I think we can all agree that most restaurants don't want to hire their own drivers. There are plenty of customers, and it's a growing number, that want to pay for the convenience of having food that's delivered to their home or maybe in the future their office, since historically they have been. And so far, restaurants themselves have been willing to pay, a delivery fee or a fee or commission, to the delivery apps to sell meals that maybe otherwise they wouldn't be selling. And that's obviously gotten very complicated amid this pandemic, where you've had a lot of restaurants shut down, and it's probably been one of the more tragic aspects of this whole thing, with so many workers going out of business who were previously in that industry. and a lot of entrepreneurs and restaurant owners who are just completely out of luck there. So I don't know if the stat is that maybe 30% of restaurants in this country are permanently shut down. It's definitely in that 25, 35 kind of range, and that's not lost on anyone here. I think that one of the questions and sort of arguments that's been made is that there's a very clear path for delivery companies of all sorts to actually turn a profit once they get big enough. And there are all sorts of examples out there around the world, including in China, of that being possible. Of course, the criticism is that these delivery apps, and I think Peter may have something to say on this as well, and Vignesh especially, is that these are kind of similarly exploitative to maybe the ride-hailing apps in terms of maybe not giving the couriers or drivers as much information as they need to know whether they're making a good decision here and understanding things like vehicle depreciation, and whether they're actually making even minimum wage with what they are doing. So that's sort of one of the questions that continues to be asked. And we've got a proposition in California, for those of you who aren't in California, pretty monumental situation happening on election day where all the delivery apps have put in like $200 million to get this thing passed, which would overturn this law called AB5. That requires people like Mark to be employees of DoorDash or not at all part of DoorDash. And so we're going to talk about all these things. I'll stop rambling, but very quickly, just at a high level in terms of financials, maybe I'll start with Vignesh, because you guys just revealed your not all of your financial data, but at least some of your financial data as part of the Uber acquisition. So we know that, especially in the second quarter of this year, Postmates was able to cut its cash burn significantly, while still growing. So I think it speaks to the trends that we were just talking about. But Vignesh, do you think that the broad question of whether these services can make money is sort of done and dusted, or is it still an open question?
I think right now, as we look at the entire ecosystem, you mentioned that size is directly related to whether these companies are able to turn a profit. But I want to be a little bit more specific about how that happens. Ultimately, each one of these businesses uses kind of a flywheel economics model. So in essence, if you have more restaurants on the platform, more customers will order from them, and more individuals will try and work on these platforms. So across the board, you'll see increases. The way that leads to being able to build a profit is that you're able to do more deliveries within a shorter amount of time. So on our platform, our engineers spend a lot of time trying to make sure that the Postmates fleet is able to do close to 3 deliveries per hour if possible, because that, it's a way of ensuring that individuals are able to work consistently. Their earnings go up in turn if there are more jobs that are available on the platform. But additionally, that way we're able to take multiple orders that would traditionally happen separately and be able to batch them together and do them as a sequence, creating many more deliveries in a shorter amount of time.
And what's your response to the allegations that your service and others like it are exploitative and need serious reform?
So, I think as we look at that specific question, much of this is really informed by the last 100 years of labor law, which is a bigger discussion than we're going to be talking about here. But in many ways, our current labor and employment system was really designed to protect workers who are working within factories and in these sort of traditional labor relationships in which someone would work their entire career at GM, for example, and then retire from that same employer. That has some upside, but it also has some tremendous downside. When I graduated college, if I was $200 short on rent, there were very few places for me to go to actually earn money instantaneously. I would have to go scour Craigslist, seeing what part-time jobs or et cetera was available. And now you can download an app and you can find work without having to have a traditionally wedded labor relationship to your employer. That, of course, means that in order to do that, you're using a classification of work that doesn't come with the sort of traditional world of benefits. But what's happened is we've started to look at this sort of like a bifurcated problem where there's one side that argues that, look, like we need to return to a world in which you have one employer. One employer ought to be enough. But for many people who work on the Postmates platform, they aren't looking necessarily to be a career for life. And I think Mark will be able to speak a little bit to what the workforce ends up looking like in this space. But there are individuals who are working part-time jobs, people who may be a parent who's trying to supplement the income within their home. And for those individuals, they're looking for ways to add to their household income. If you're able to do a job between when you get off of your traditional work and picking up your kid from daycare, there's value to that. At the same time, I think when we start thinking about ways to support workers in this space, we need to figure out how to take those sort of traditional benefits and try and port them over to a world in which someone may have multiple employers. So if you're working upwards of 35 hours a week, but you're working on multiple platforms or have a part-time job in addition to that, you're working 35 hours. If that was one job, you would probably have a healthcare plan. But now, even if you're an employee, you're not getting a healthcare plan from any of those employers. So how can we start to decouple that benefits allocation from that individual job? And that's really, I think, the long-term project of this question.
Well, I think I want to move to Mark for a second, because I think that the cynical take on this is that the economics of these businesses are so challenged that it has taken this significant regulatory or legislative threat, which would have, it seems, a very material impact on Postmates, in order to get Postmates and everyone else to come to the table with more benefits to offer to these people who don't have these safety nets. So Mark, what do you think about that? Is that, I know that you've expressed some optimism around the business model and the ability of these platforms as they get bigger to just be more efficient and make it easier for you to earn more as well. So can you speak to some of this?
Yeah, certainly. And I really understand, Vicky's discussion about, when you have a part-time job. And, for me, my situation was exactly as you described, for someone who, does this part-time, and I would say somewhere between 12 and 18 hours a week. I would, be at my regular day job. And then, on for dinners, from say 5 to 8:30 at night. And then, throughout Sunday, tip, you always want to dash or run Postmates during football Sundays. It's you're always going to be busy. So for me, earning that extra money, and I would gross about $20 an hour, which was okay, which was fine, for me. My concern about that is that a lot of times, these types of platforms are promoted as something, or you have benefits or bonuses where you need to work maybe 30 hours a week to earn a certain bonus, and with things like Uber and Lyft, where they would have where you can rent a car for them, and it's sort of expressed as a way where you can earn a living doing this job, where the first 12 to 18 hours are relatively simple, and you can kind of handpick the busiest times when you to deliver. But when you go from 18 hours up to 35 hours to 40 hours, it gets, it becomes much more rough sledding, as far as trying to earn money. Again, I'm using my own equipment, my own car, my own gas, my own, again, depreciation, et cetera. And so there's a lot of responsibility sort of on the backs of drivers and delivery people. Again, I really found it convenient and helpful and enjoyable as sort of a counterpoint to, a desk job with spreadsheets, et cetera. But if you're sort of an unskilled, worker and you're driving, and, there's really not a career here. And I think sometimes you can get sucked into the idea of, because you have to make rent, you have to eat. You get kind of sucked into, the immediate payouts. And, again, it's really difficult for, to make a living, doing this full time.
So, before we move on to Peter, I should mention we've got a couple of commenters already. So please feel free to ask questions as you think of them, and we will see these questions and be able to respond to them. Or comments are fine too. Peter, you see some problems with the status quo, right? You don't like you don't like the existing delivery apps that are there, and you're trying to do something different. So tell us what's wrong.
So ultimately, the enough demand to make the economics work argument, unfortunately, can easily break down, right? If you look at the current state of affairs with delivery food, there's so much cost involved, even at the target that is unreachable currently of 3 deliveries per hour per driver, that a big chunk of the population is simply priced out of the food. And so you end up in this sort of catch-22 situation where, it would be great to have the demand, but you can't have the demand because the prices are too high, and you just can't exit this point that the food delivery companies are in the United States. Ultimately, that is exactly why we started our company. And started looking for different efficiencies in the ecosystem beyond just what the typical delivery company can optimize, which is trying to batch more rides for a single order. And you have to start looking towards the places where the food is actually manufactured by the restaurants, because if you keep cutting into their prices to bring down the cost low enough for the consumer, for it to make sense to even get delivery food, then you're pricing them out of the equation, and they don't make enough money to survive, right?
But just to be clear, and this is a great segue into Kelly if our audio is working. But Peter, are you saying that Postmates, Uber, even DoorDash, Waiter, and some of these others, they're just not going to be able to turn a profit? Their model is fundamentally flawed. Is that what you're saying?
I think unless it becomes an actual monopoly in the United States, where all the companies join into a single entity, it will be very, very difficult. There is still sort of parts and pockets of their business that can be profitable, but they happen to be around the luxury customers, the higher end customers. Everything else is incredibly difficult to make work and goes against the narrative that they're telling, that we are going to grow in size, and as soon as we have the concentrated demand, our business model will flip to profitable.
But so I agree with you. I don't think anyone will argue these are luxury services for the customers, and the same goes with ride hailing, right? Taking an Uber, it's not cheap, and it was certainly subsidized for a long time. These are luxuries, but so is an iPhone, right? And enough people will sometimes want something if it gives them enough value or utility, or it saves them time, or it saves them whatever it is. So could it be that you're just underestimating people's ability to afford this luxury? Could you be wrong?
I think iPhones and buying food are generally very different products, right? The truth is that as you keep moving to the different segments of society, the opportunity cost of your time changes entirely, which is a big question in terms of the amount of money that you're willing to spend on outsourcing your daily cooking to someone else, right? And it's something that we see during the pandemic as well, that the economics have become better because a lot of the fine dining has actually shifted towards food delivery because you cannot go out. But ultimately, that is just an illusion of a reality. The truth is, again, that if you want to do even more deliveries per hour, you need very, very dense set of customers. And you can either make it work in very specific neighborhoods that have tons of rich people living, or the story that you're telling just breaks down because the cost is too high for most people.
So Kelly, does your audio work? Hopefully, maybe. Kelly, are you?
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Are we back in?
You're in.
Yay! Rookie move. My goodness.
Okay. So again, we're obviously there are three critical parts of this story, right? There's the app marketplace, there's the buyer, actually four: the buyer, the courier, and then the restaurant. So four parties here, and you can certainly speak to the restaurant side. Assuming you've listened to this conversation so far, there are clearly some differences of opinion, a lot of differences of opinion. What's your point of view, and what's the point of view of restaurants and how they play in this ecosystem in the long term? For whom does this work? For whom does this not work? What does the pandemic mean? I'm assuming it's been a very, very good for your service as well, to help restaurants be able to participate if they weren't already and get that extra revenue. But yeah, talk to us about it in these terms. Like what are the economics of these businesses? Are they sustainable? Are they not? What's the perspective of the restaurateur?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with the pandemic, it has definitely, we've seen a shift to an increase of people trying out the apps for the first time, and trying it for pickup, trying it for delivery. We've seen a whole new set of couriers coming into our restaurants. And so as a restaurant, you have to really adapt to that, and sort of develop those new systems and process. And you can't look past any of them, because that could be a customer that you're potentially looking past, I would say. And so from the virtual brand standpoint, it's, providing these restaurants with an opportunity to get, one more order through their doors. It's the opportunity to get one more courier through their doors, picking up one or two different orders. So it really helps them with sort of the, the scalability of it, of making up for potentially some of that lost revenue that they're not able to achieve because their dining room's closed or they're at that 25% capacity. So I think from the restaurant's perspective, we're almost aiding in sort of providing additional, pickup opportunities for these couriers, so that they can be generating more revenue. And perhaps they would be picking up 2 orders where they can do 4 orders in an hour as opposed to that 3, or really being able to scale it from that standpoint. So I do see the virtual brands as being sort of an asset to these third-party delivery companies, as well as the couriers that are out in the field. Anything to give them another opportunity to be able to make a delivery, I think is a win.
But what's the long term here? I mean, there have been, complaints here and there from restaurants about commissions. There have been some commission caps instituted during this pandemic period in some cities. So what does this relationship look like long term? I guess it really depends on the type of restaurant, but are these, you're saying that this is a critical period of time where restaurants need to do this. Are they going to want to do this in the long run?
I think the restaurants will always want to be making more money. I think that's one of the, that's how this delivery business, I think, evolved in the restaurant industry, is that they were always looking for, where do I get that next 3 orders, that next 4 orders, that next 5 orders. So I do believe that, pandemic aside, I think the delivery business, and it is here to stay. I do think it will continue to evolve from a commission standpoint, from a structure standpoint, because there's profitability in all of it. We spoke about it's being sort of this luxury service of having food delivered, and it is, and it's something that people, I think, have grown to love, of getting their food delivered over the past few months. And I do think they will continue to want to pay to have that service. And once you sort of break down the logistics of it, there is a fee for every sort of part of the process that unfortunately you can't necessarily eliminate. So it will be about sort of optimizing it, but it's here to stay for sure. Okay,
so going back to Vignesh, I mean, you heard all of Peter's criticisms about the business model, and it's amazing that this still is an unresolved thing in some people's minds. I mean, again, I always come back to Uber, which is going to be your parent company soon, next year, and look at the ride-hailing business, which again is a luxury, and they've been raising prices actually match, or give them the ability to turn a profit. But a lot of people were doubting Uber for a long time on that front, and I think they've almost answered that question. At least they're starting to, given the pre-pandemic progress that they had. So do you think that there's, I mean, I don't know if you've crunched the math on this in your government relations role, but does it surprise you that the debate still continues and you've got Peter here, who's really trying to poke holes in just the fundamental nature of this business model?
It doesn't surprise me. I definitely think there's a lot of demystifying that needs to happen in this space, and discussions like this, of course, play a really important role in pushing that forward. But I want to push back against the iPhone analogy, because I think in this situation, we're talking about something that's much more akin to video on demand, where you have a number of offerings. You have Amazon Prime, you have Netflix, you have Hulu. Each one of those situations, is it a luxury product? Maybe. It depends. And it depends on what the cost calculus the consumer is making between that and staying with their cable plan or using some other means in order to access media is, which is really similar to how this functions. We're both competing with someone's laziness as well as our competitors in terms of their penetration in a specific area. But simultaneously, if we're hyper focused only on what the density is, we're going to miss out on both consumers and restaurants that are looking for ways to be able to access this, particularly in ex-urban communities. Because even in the ride-sharing space, yes, urban areas always had taxis, but when you got out to the suburbs or you got out to rural communities, it was incredibly difficult to get a ride when you needed it. And there were individuals that were looking for opportunities to work. So you had both of these areas where there's a need and there's a way to meet that need. The question really becomes how you are subsidizing one versus the other. And that requires, I think, more than anything else, thoughtfulness, and not necessarily, having, I think for us, we're hyper-focused on making sure that we are driving enough efficiency in our urban communities to be able to make it work in those other locations as well.
So, Mark, what do you think about this debate? Do you fall more on Vignesh's side or Peter's side, or do you see, do you see elements of both arguments that you agree with?
Well, what Vignesh was talking about with trying to make, having some of your revenue sort of supplement others, where you can have drivers and you can have certain deliveries where maybe the platform makes less on certain orders in order to subsidize or be able to in my perspective be able to pay the drivers a little bit more for a specific delivery that's not that doesn't bring in as much revenue. I think as a driver, I'm just looking to make a certain amount of money every hour, and I don't care if it's one delivery, and I'd prefer it's not 4 or 5 deliveries, but which can get really busy. But whether it's one delivery an hour, 3 deliveries an hour, looking at it from a time perspective, and I want to make sure that I'm earning a certain amount, on an hourly basis. And I think there's certain orders where I know I'm gonna my earnings aren't always going to be consistent on a delivery basis. I'm going to have some orders where I make $13, for 20 minutes of work, which is amazing. And there's some times where I kind of get stuck with a 40-minute order and I only make $7. So I think there's a lot of ability within the platforms to be able to, take some of the earnings from certain deliveries and be able to kind of subsidize that out. And in my experience, with, several thousand deliveries with DoorDash, I've been able to kind of see that happen, but I'm always concerned that, the supply and demand of delivery with the amount of orders out there, that it's almost like a reverse auction where, the driver who will do a certain job for the least amount of money is the one who's going to, get picked. And so I just find it really challenging to find more, especially during a pandemic, to find more ability to earn more money, on an hourly basis. I just don't know how much blood there is in that stone,
I see. Yeah. And Jane Diamond asks that she says, it sounds like higher efficiency or more deliveries per hour is great for the platforms, not as good for the couriers, and maybe they're working harder for the same pay or not not more pay. I think that you do get more pay. So I don't think there's
yeah,
right?
if I may say that, and I see the question here. You know, when from my perspective, when I'm, my time, it's, from the time I get the delivery to the restaurant, when I'm at the restaurant, and then delivering to the customer. There's sort of three parts to it. And if I get multiple deliveries, which I enjoy, and I on behalf of drivers, we all enjoy those. So if I go to a certain, street that has a lot of restaurants on it, and, I can go to the Chinese restaurant here, and then 2 doors down is the sushi, and then 2 doors down is the Mexican restaurant, and I can pick up all three, just fairly rare, but it happens. I'm eliminating that drive to the restaurant portion of my delivery, for two of those deliveries, and I'm going to make, more money when I do that. And so, and that's just a matter of, cutting down the time to, for each delivery over the course of my career as a spreadsheet nerd. I've calculated that it's 1.8 deliveries per hour is my average over my time. So yes, we do want more deliveries, which will give us, tend to give us more earnings per hour. So we do appreciate that, but it's not necessarily guaranteed, but we'll certainly take it.
So Christina Berta Jones pushes back on Vignesh's video on demand analogy, saying she doesn't quite agree with it. And I wonder, Peter, if you have anything more to say on this front. And I have sort of a follow-up question, but I'm just curious. You've just heard Vignesh talk, and Mark, what's your response to all of this?
I mean, I just really want the math to sink into people, because I think there's a lot of clouding that seems to happen in the valley around these things, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. Let's go with the number that the delivery companies are reporting, which I think is 2.2 deliveries an hour. If you're paying people $20, right? There's close to $8 of delivery cost in your meal. Let's just be honest about what that means for the average customer, right? It's not something that they're willing to go. And I see a comment here about pizza, burgers, fast food is the classic example of it. If you want to look around the ecosystem of what people are eating in the United States and why they're doing that, it's not because people prefer to create health problems down the road by eating burgers and fries that are extremely unhealthy. It's because of the price, right? That's the reality of American society. And it's the same exact case here. You're adding $8, you're pricing out a lot of people from that service. So
and you mentioned the health aspect, and maybe Kelly can talk about this too. I did notice there are some comfort food brands that you work with as part of virtual dining concepts. This is something that I remember at the beginning of the pandemic when I think there's even some data disclosed from various platforms on comfort food being very in demand. And that seemed, not ideal, given that, I think the hope is that as a society, we would be healthier so that we can survive the pandemic better. Whereas a lot of the food that's being delivered is not exactly healthy, a lot of fast food. And that seems to be I don't know if that's a top of mind issue, but it's certainly something I've been wondering about. Kelly, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a fast food standpoint, I do agree that, from a pricing structure, sometimes those options are a little bit more affordable. So people are, perhaps that's why they lean that route. It could also be, you're sitting at home and that's the comfort food. It's the same reason why you see spikes during games, and you see it during, Friday, Saturday nights. You see that sort of spike in those comfort food levels. So I mean, I understand that perspective. I would say that's sort of the reason why we, in looking at restaurants and some of the brands that we're looking to put forth, is giving some of these restaurants that perhaps are only those fast food options, the opportunity to expand into some of those healthier options, so that they too can get a piece of the pie, and to increase that number of offerings on those platforms. Because it's definitely an opportunity when you're scrolling through any of those platforms right now typically use the pizzas, the wings, those fast food options are the first ones that you sort of see from the popularity perspective. I think you have to really seek out some of those healthier options within those platforms. From a fee perspective, I do sort of lean on the side of there's a cost to having some of those goods delivered, and for some people they can definitely time is money on it. And it is something where if I can, work an extra 2 hours at home without having to go out and get food delivered, then yeah, that $15 fee, whatever the fee may be, is something that becomes worthwhile to me. And do I think that some of that should go back to those couriers? Absolutely. The ones that are able to execute 4 orders in an hour, or that can get one more order because now they're making $25 an hour and they see the value in that. I do think there could be a greater push to make those drivers happier. And in speaking on behalf of all restaurants, lower commissions for us. So I do think that there is a workability on that. But at the end of the day, there's a profitability that is needed for that service. That is a service that we all love to take advantage of. And that is the Postmates, the Uber Eats, the Grubhubs and DoorDashes of the world. So.
And we've got our good friend Matt Newberg asking about how startups and platforms are starting to consolidate the making and selling of food through licensing, like your company, Kelly. And I guess I didn't realize Postmates has a ghost kitchen in Los Angeles. So maybe Vignesh can tell us how that's working. VKC is based in the Bay Area and just got a bunch more funding. And Matt's asking, is this the best way to make the economics work? So. Peter, I'm curious what you think about these efforts as well. I mean, I know what you think, Kelly, of course, but Peter, would love to know what you think about that. And Vignesh, if you could give us an update on your ghost kitchen in LA, we'd love to hear how it's going.
So I think ghost kitchens play a very understandable role. Where we heard from Mark that he's driving around to different restaurants picking up food. When you're thinking about batching certain deliveries together, if you have to pick up from different places, that actually is impossible, because just from a mathematical sense, it significantly decreases the probability of people ordering at the same time from the same place, right? So if you think about the economics of the business, it's a clever move. And now, whether restaurants will at large opt to rent space from another company and pay even more of the little that's left for them to another Silicon Valley company is an interesting question. We are seeing a lot of restaurateurs in the market pursue their individual strategy of identifying really, really cheap real estate around the city and being able to execute on that way cheaper than what the ghost kitchen companies are offering. So all of this is about access, right? And if companies come in and they basically buy up all the real estate and cut the restaurant's access off, then at least from a capitalistic perspective, they have a chance of succeeding. Now, if as a society that's what we want or not is a different question that I think I'm not going to get into right now.
But you talk about real estate. Obviously, real estate prices have plummeted, almost everywhere commercially. And so some of these business models around, having real estate in high-priced locations, and helping these virtual or delivery-only brands, maybe that's not as good of a value prop now, given that downtown LA or downtown San Francisco real estate is actually pretty available and plentiful. Is that also what you're thinking about too?
Look, I think the pandemic again is a short-term sort of thing that we're seeing right now. I wouldn't base my long-term bets on anything that the pandemic has brought around. There's certain trends that existed before that has been accelerated by the pandemic. I think those point towards interesting aspects of how the world is moving in digital. This panel as an example, and the software that we're using for it is a great example of it. We're just living in different places. It's impossible for us to execute on it. But when it comes to commercial real estate and its long-term value. The real estate markets go through cycles. People move to the suburbs, then they move back in the cities. You can look at Asian markets that had pandemics before and what happened to commercial real estate after. I don't think that in the long term, commercial real estate is going to be in some huge trouble here in downtown San Francisco. So I wouldn't base it on that.
Okay.
My point was merely if you're a delivery company that operates kitchens, now you own the customer, now you own the real estate, where is the restaurant going to go, right? Where should they open? And when you create these kinds of barriers to entering the market, you can start charging and exploiting, and I think that's exactly the plan here.
And so Vignesh, definitely let us know about your ghost kitchen. We have a couple of questions for you as well about portable benefits, and I'm trying to see who asked that first, but there was a question about, so Nick followed up, let's see.
It was Jimmy Thompson.
Got it. Yes. So he's asking about these portable benefits, which I assume he's talking about something much broader and more fundamental than the Prop 22 offer, if you will, that Postmates and everyone else is bringing to the table there. And then the follow-up question is who's responsible for those costs. But yeah, so I don't know if you can answer both those questions briefly, but that's
I'll try and keep it real quick. But in the ghost kitchen, virtual kitchen space, I don't really see it so much as trying to supplant or push out of the market the traditional restaurants. Like here, this is really an area of need for restaurants that are considering an additional location, but don't necessarily have the capital to be able to invest, to be able to meet that additional capacity that they're looking for. So we actually have one right up the street from me. We have a takeout location for Homeroom, which is a mac and cheese restaurant. And then they have a permanent location as well. And they're actually a block away from each other. They're running two different kitchens and they run all of that themselves. But one of them effectively functions like a virtual kitchen, right? They're only doing takeout orders from there and they own the space, and they like to have it set up that way so that their point of sale systems aren't interfering with their in-house dining. But additionally, because, you know, in many of the locations that you may have a ton of demand, downtown LA is a great example, commercial rents tend to be really high already. So if you have the ability to be able to augment your existing delivery flow from your location in Pasadena or in Santa Monica, where you already have a location with this additional sort of part-time space in order to fill in the gaps in demand, you know, I think there's a value proposition there for restaurants that really does make sense. And it makes sense for us to be able to enable them to share that space with other restaurants as well. To respond to the portable benefits question, this one is an interesting one because it speaks to some of the labor issues that I brought up before. But there's two reasons why portable benefits have not been offered, or benefits, sort of traditional benefits have not been offered by platforms. One of them is that the traditional test for whether someone's an employee is triggered by the provision of benefits. So if you're offering someone benefits, you're treating them like an employee and it triggers employee status. So businesses get reticent to do that without some sort of intervention. The other part of this is if a number of businesses decide to do this together, say we did this with a DoorDash or with Lyft, there's a little bit of an antitrust problem there because we are now all in concert working on the benefits that are offered to certain workers. So we need legislative interference to create a framework that's workable there. So that's really what we're looking for. And there was broad alignment between industry and organized labor on this point up until AB 5 was passed last year. And I urge folks to actually look up a piece that discussed this, that was called Common Ground for Independent Workers, which was signed on to by folks, including the CEOs of Lyft and SEIU and Jobs with Justice and other organizations. There was a pretty broad consensus on it. I think, unfortunately, the worker advocates had a lot of leverage in blue states and industry had a lot of leverage in red states, and no one wanted to give anything up. So now, you know, AB 5 is really a shot across the bow, and we still have this. We have an opportunity now to try and build something new. The question is whether we're going to seize on that opportunity or not.
Okay. In terms of, so I've heard the word subscription come up from Uber in particular. I think Nelson Chai was talking about the idea of the kind of bundle or subscription of on-demand services, including food and other things. Obviously, all these big delivery platforms are essentially all going to end up doing or offering the same stuff. I mean, everyone's getting into convenience store items and groceries, and everyone's basically going to try to give you everything to your front door. And I sort of wonder what the implications of that are. So if any of you have thoughts there, that's something I'd love to think through. Whether that means there's going to need to be more consolidation, since these things are going to overlap more and more. I forgot to mention GoPuff is another one to watch. Although their business models are slightly different since they own inventory. But that's something I was hoping to ask you guys about. What are your thoughts there about this like expansion of the types of products that all these delivery apps have? And this idea that you could potentially bundle like ride hailing with food or some other types of services. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
I'm happy to comment on that. I think from an economics perspective, one of the important metrics that our companies look at is average order value, right? The sweeter the order value is, ultimately, the easier it is to make the economics of a single delivery work. And obviously, the economics of the single deliveries is the sum of those things is what makes the whole sort of ecosystem operate. So it's obvious why our companies tend to look at other sort of complementary goods that we can sell along in the same delivery that makes sense for the consumer to buy together. The risk in that is that if you can't make your business work without the other, ultimately that means that your space of competition is larger than you think. The other companies that are now delivering the complementary goods that are necessary for your business model to work have a chance to replicate what you do. And as a result of that, your probability of success and your expected value as a result of that investment in that firm goes down. So I think that's sort of the double-edged sword of opportunity and risk in this particular question.
But I think part of this is also that there are relatively few companies that do have a path to your front door. Amazon being one of them, but you have these delivery and ride-hailing companies as well. We haven't talked about Instacart. They're pretty big and able to function profitably as well. So I guess I'm wondering, you're just saying that sorry guys, I forgot to turn off my notifications. You're just saying that when you try to take on too much, that's a massive risk to try to think that you can offer everything to everyone and actually execute.
And in particular, I would call out that to me, when companies kind of move on from their core product and trying to make that work economically to other shiny things, saying, oh, no, it's going to be the next thing that will make us work. It's usually a bad sign, right? If you look at companies like Amazon, they never really had to raise prices on things. If anything, things got cheaper on Amazon over time, which is a sign of sort of a good business to be in, versus the story of Uber, where everybody got promised that we won't have to buy cars ever again. And I remember I was one of those students at UCLA at the time taking $5 rides from UCLA to downtown. And I was really excited because it is a pain to own a car. But that's no longer true. And so now I own a car.
Understood. Looks like we lost Vignesh for a second anyway. But Mark, what's your thought on this like bundling idea? Do you feel like it makes sense for you to do different types of things?
Well, personally, I specialize, when I was hearing Peter talk, I was thinking of, if you specialize in everything, you specialize in nothing. What I like to do is I enjoyed I enjoy delivering food, and it worked. There's a variety of different, things that you can do here sort of on these platforms. But, I have a little tiny car. It's not particularly clean. And I just specialized in, it's easy for me to get in and out of parking spots, to pick up food and go deliver. I have tried. I did work with Instacart for a while, and it's actually going out and not only doing the deliveries, but actually going through the aisles of a grocery store and trying to find the 8-ounce low-fat sizzling ranch dressing is it's actually really hard, or it's a lot more challenging, and it's a lot more difficult than simply picking up an order of chicken enchiladas and sending them to someone's house. I'd also driven ease for a short time, and it's really whatever you like to do. If you like to drive people around and have conversations or not have conversations, you might want to consider Uber or Lyft. It just worked out for me. My personal tastes of delivering food. So there's a lot of room out there for a variety of different deliveries, and you just kind of pick the one that's best, but don't do it as a career.
And Kelly, we're getting to 5 minutes left, so if anyone has questions from the folks that are listening, now's the time. But Kelly, I was going to ask. I meant to ask you earlier. You're obviously working with restaurants, and then presumably also helping them connect to the delivery sources of demand, the delivery apps and the sources of demand for the virtual kitchen goods that they're creating or making. Do you have a preference on how do you differentiate between the delivery apps today? What is the meaningful difference? And again, we're just seeing continued consolidation. Amir used to be standalone, no longer. Vignesh used to be, standalone with Postmates, soon no longer. What does that mean? What does that mean for leverage for your customers, the restaurateurs, as they deal with these delivery apps? Isn't it going to make it a little bit harder on the commission side? And how do you just think about the companies and differentiate between them?
Yeah, I think it's really important that a lot of the companies in the neighborhoods that they've sort of blossomed in, they have a very specific customer base. They've gone out, and the customer acquisition plans that some of these smaller companies have had, they have that very sort of, I guess you could say, dedicated customer base. And so it's important that, and while it is difficult from a restaurant's perspective, you can't alienate any of them. It's really important that you're actively choosing to work with these partners and find out, the different nuances of what makes them tick and what makes their customers tick. Because then I think you learn more about your customers that way as well. If for some reason on Postmates, everybody's always ordering extra cheese, but on DoorDash, they're always ordering the burger, you start to question it, and it helps you learn more about your brand. So I think it's really important that regardless of, sort of their, not regardless of, but their fee structures and whether they're handing you a tablet or a printer or a POS integration, it's important that you're taking the time to sort of review them as a restaurant owner and operator. The solution that sort of Virtual Dining Concepts is bringing to these restaurants is that we're going to sort of handle all of that for you, because you're owning your own current restaurant. And we don't want you to take your eyes off the prize from that perspective. Your core brand is what's most important. And this is just supposed to be an added on sort of supplement to that in sort of the easiest way possible. And in our eyes, it's important, again, to view sort of all of those different delivery partners, because they all have different fan bases and different reasons why their customers choose them. So.
Okay, well, we're pretty much at the end here. So if any of you speaking have any questions for one another, or any other point that you'd like to make, I do always enjoy when there are still unresolved issues, questions, and an industry is still young enough that there's a lot more to play out. So it's always very fun for me as an observer. But yeah, if anyone else has any other comments, now's the time.
If I may, I enjoyed the conversation about the ghost kitchens, and I haven't been driving for the last 6 months due to I'm lucky, and I was able to take some time off once COVID hit here in the Bay Area mid-March. The idea of driving to a dedicated food preparation location where I don't have to fight with I don't have to compete for parking spaces or traffic, with those who are there, for a sit down meal. And I can just kind of roll through, and I become, familiar with the area. That's something that drivers, you become a better driver when you're familiar in an area where, where to park, what the traffic patterns are like, et cetera. So, a ghost kitchen from a driver's perspective, all I can think about is, what if it's a drive-through and I don't have to get out of my car, I don't have to park, I don't have to walk 2 blocks. It's really nice from my perspective. And, just as a consumer, sometimes I feel like it's not really in competition with, I don't know if people are choosing between having a meal at home and deciding to go out. It almost seems like there's an entertainment factor and sort of a different social factor with, going out to eat somewhere. Or maybe it just seems like a fever dream here, in COVID. But, versus I just need to be convenient and I'm going to stay home tonight, and I'm going to stay home. So I don't know how much, again, from a consumer perspective, how much of a real fight that is, if you're making, food specifically for takeout versus, the in-restaurant experience.
No, that's a very, very good point.
If I may, I'd like to add on to Mark's, because I'm in agreement here. Actually, that's a lot how our company works. We have a hub from which we distribute all the food. So at the time that the driver is picking up, you're just picking up everything together from a single location. And it comes with another benefit as well, which we tend to forget about. Food in particular, but generally business is about building relationships with your customer, right? And at the front line of those relationships are drivers, like Mark used to be before the pandemic. And ultimately, the fact that every time some new person comes to your door is actually a disadvantage to a lot of these companies, because you cannot build a relationship with your driver. You can't build a trusting relationship. And as a result of that, the experience that you have is way worse. And so that's a particular aspect of our business that consumers really enjoy.
Okay, well, we've hit time. Awesome to meet you guys, and Kelly, and yeah, thanks for the time. And I guess if you are watching this, you can click the leave button, and there are lots of other sessions going on. So please stick around for everything else that's coming up in this event. And yeah, thanks for the conversation.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.